All right. So for this walkthrough, and I'm going to have a link for you guys to be able to copy the starting point file, what I am in the YouTube video and in the assignment, if you guys are wanting to follow along. Okay, so the goal of this lesson is to kind of go over an introduction of BEM, which is a kind of formatting methodology using CSS and HTML to make it so it's a lot easier to write your code, to have less repetitive code, and to make it ultimately easier to fix any potential issues that you might end up having. Okay? So let's kind of look at BEM. BEM is a way that we ultimately will look at things. Okay? So in my HTML, we are breaking up stuff semantically to organize our code. But when we're looking visually, we want to try to be able to describe the stuff that we're looking at. Excuse me. So like here, if this is a card, then that is going to be my block, okay, which is like the main thing that I'm talking about. My block or my card could have certain set of styling. This would make it so that it's reusable. Next time I want to use a card, I don't have to recreate all the stuff, implementing the colors, margins, padding, any of that stuff. I could do it just one time, and then I could reuse that class that I'm using to describe it all in other places. Okay, now each card or block ends up having maybe smaller pieces of it or smaller components. These would be called elements. Okay, so if I'm looking at this as my card, this is my whole thing. My card is built up using, say, an image, title, some description, or maybe a button. Okay, all of those are different elements on there. Now, the next piece would be modifiers. So let me go to just a different page so we can see it. Okay, so this is the basic formatting for it. And all of this is done using classes, but it's like a naming structure. The block is the main thing. The element is like any of the smaller components that are a part of that block that can't really be described by themselves. You could have full components, full like block things inside of other blocks, depending on how they're being set up. So you just need to kind of plan out your stuff, your content. Now we can all have modifiers that can modify a block element or just the block itself. So if you're looking here, so if I'm setting up, say, a class for a button, and ideally you want to have the name be very descriptive, and your modifier name should be, really what is being changed so that it's very understood. Okay, so here, if this was my block, then that is the class that I would be designing. Okay. Okay, so if that's the class that I'm designing, that might be I am doing a specific styling for every button that I may see in my page. Now I could modify that, and that's where the third piece for the BEM, block element modifier, would come in. I could have my normal button styling, okay? And then I can modify it with a modifier. Now, when I write a modifier, I'm writing what I am modifying. So in this case, I'm modifying a block component, and I'm using 2 dashes, and then writing what I'm modifying. So this is letting me know that that's like my secondary button type for my styling. If you do it this way, ultimately you could start making your code easier to read, easier to understand on what's doing what. Looking at these classes from CSS, it's easier to understand. Looking here in HTML, it is easier to understand. So it helps build confidence in being able to make changes and further design your pages. Okay, so the modifier can be used not just on a block, it can also be used on an element too. So if I had in my example here, the card underscore, that's 2 underscores, image is my block element, I could modify that as well. Okay. What I don't want to do is I don't want to use the modifier by itself. It should always augment, not replace, what is the base block styling or the base class. Okay. This would be like an example. So I have like a figure that my block element would be a photo. This would be a block element. This is a part. The image is a part of the figure. The fig caption is a part of my photo block. Okay, so I would write them with 2 underscores. And then I can individually style these. Okay, so and I can add modifiers as I need to. So knowing that, let's look at our individual code here that I have a copy of. So I got a number of things that we can use. I have a header that has very simple navigation with just 3 links that we're going to want to style. I have a main title, and I have 2 sections. Section 1 has a title, an H2 title, and a paragraph. And then I have another one down here. And in between, I have 3 cards. Now, I have the cards grouped right now with a div just to hold all of them. And then each one of the cards is set up using a div where it has an image, a title, and a paragraph, and a button, okay, for each one of those. So that's what I see here, okay. So we are going to play around with CSS to start doing that, to start doing the styling, okay? So we're going to be using the CSS to augment our HTML design using only classes, using the BEM methodology, okay? What we're also going to be doing is we're going to be building some utility classes. So things that are really good at doing one thing really well, we're going to go ahead and do that. So to start off, we want to start writing some utility classes. I'm going to go ahead and write one. Now, whenever I write a class in CSS, I have to start with a period. So we're going to do grid because I want to design a rule for when I want stuff to be laid out in a grid. So inside of this is basically my selector. It is a class selector because we start with a period, and then we have a name. As long as this name matches exactly even how I'm typing it into the class that I define in HTML, then this rule will be applied. Now inside these squiggle brackets, I can apply different rules. In this one, I want to display grid, okay? And then I also want to give it a gap between the individual pieces. So I'm going to write gap. And if that doesn't work for you, you could write grid, column, gap. Either one of those will work. Gap, though, is now the new way that we can write it. So I can say a gap of 1 rem, and then this will be relative to the size of my fonts. So this is a class that I want to add. Now, I'm going to organize my CSS code. So I'm going to say that this is utility classes, and then I'm going to comment it out with a control slash. That is my utility classes. I'm going to copy it, and then underneath I'm going to do end of utility classes. This just makes it easier for me to recognize what's doing what. Now utility classes, they're only really doing one thing. This is only setting up grid. I'm not setting up background colors, not doing any of that stuff. I'm just doing basic stuff. This, all I want it to do is just put it into a grid, okay? So now if I go here, let's look at our navigation. We want to, let's say, put this into grid. So I'm thinking that I want to have each one of the links horizontal. So if I did it in grid, that would be 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So then using grid, which I know that you guys have not learned this yet, but you guys can kind of follow along. When we are doing that, we want to apply that to the direct parent. So that's why I've been talking about direct child and direct parent. So if we want to apply it to these links, I need to find what element is directly holding these. Okay, we can't say header because header is directly holding nav. If I minimize nav, okay, I don't see anything else. So header is directly holding nav. Nav is directly holding the H2 and the unordered list. Okay, so I can't use that for this. I need to look for the specific line items. Okay, Now this unordered list is directly holding these line items because if I minimize them, that's all that I see for this. So this would be the direct parent, and these would be the direct children of the unordered list. So here is where I would start adding my classes. So I'm going to use a class, and I need to use double quotes, and I'm going to write grid. Okay, now instantly we just seen that it just spaced out a little bit. That's because we put some spacing in between each grid item in our class, and then we displayed it as grid. Now it didn't make it horizontal, so we want to make some changes. Now my utility class, this is only displaying grid, but it's not saying how I want to display grid. So let's go ahead and add something to modify this. And I'm doing it in this way instead of trying to think of like navigation as my block element and doing this as a utility class, because there may be multiple areas where I'm going to be displaying grid and I don't want it to be locked into this navigation. Okay, so let's do dot grid, and then I'm going to modify it. So I'm going to modify it with 3 columns. So I'm giving it a specific name of what I'm doing so I can see that and understand what's going on. Okay, so I want to say grid, template, columns, okay, and then I want to choose. Now, if for whatever reason, I'm just going to take a little break here. If you don't see these popping up when you are typing like this, okay, we need to go to our settings. Okay, so I'm going to go here to my settings. Okay, let me go ahead and save real quick. Save. Doesn't want me to save right now. There we go. That was taking a long time. Okay. We go to settings. And when this opens up, I can look at my editor settings and I can have it autocomplete. So editor preferences. I could change my colors, but that's not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on here. If this is not selected, that autocomplete, okay, then this is not going to allow for it to give you suggestions of stuff to finish. If you don't have code folding, you can't click that little drop down to open and close stuff. So we want to have that. We want to make sure that we have line numbers. Basically, we want to have almost all of this stuff checked, okay? And then we can go back to our work. Love it when it goes slow. Okay. So then once we get into here, now that should finish, we want to set how many columns, okay? So our modifier is just going to put it in, so grid template, columns, and we want to do 3 columns of equal width. So 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR. I'm putting spaces between each one, okay? FR is a new unit. It's called a fractional unit, and what it's going to do is it's going to take the full space that it has, and it's going to split it up into 3 equal parts. When that happens, these 3 equal parts, I don't need to do the math on it. It's just going to do it by itself. Okay, grid template columns, that's all that I want it to do. It's just going to put it in 3 columns. That is a utility class. It's only doing one thing. I'm not applying colors or anything else. It's just doing one thing, okay? So that means now I need to apply this class, okay? So in here, on my unordered list, I want to add additional classes. I can add as many classes as I want between the 2 double quotes as long as I have them separated by a space. So I'm thinking in order of biggest to smallest. The grid is my, basically that's my block, and then I'm putting my modifier right afterwards. And now this is putting the display as grid and giving it a little bit of spacing. This is splitting it up into 3 columns. And so now I have them, labeled next to each other. Okay, so that is utility classes. Now let's look at doing some actual BEM stuff. So this would be my block. So I'm going to do block components, and that would be my next area. You're doing classes first, block, then block elements, and then you can do your modifiers. We want to kind of keep them all somewhat organized. Okay, so if it's not a utility, it should be in its proper area. End of block components. All right, so in here, so let's look at what we would want to do in terms of block. Now I'm thinking in terms of navigation, but I'm thinking in terms of visual navigation. Okay, this is what I see. This is my navigation. What do I want to not have to see? I don't want to have to see these bullets. I think that that looks kind of dumb. Okay, for my navigation, I want those to go away. Maybe I want every one of my like my navigation itself to have maybe a box around it. I can do that. Each one of my navigation items, so navigation items, that would be this link, and this link. Maybe I want them to have a specific styling, like they don't have an underline under each one. Okay, so if I'm thinking in terms of like BEM, my block is my navigation, and I want all of what I want to design on every one of my pages. I'm never going to have a bullet on there, so I want that to be one of my designs. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to do dot navigation. That is going to be my navigation. That is going to be one of my block components, and I'm going to style this. So let's go ahead and look at block. So what do I want? Well, I want to get rid of this bullet. So this is a list thing. So that's what I'm going to type first. List. I got list style image, list style position, list style type. I'm going to go ahead and do list style type, and then I'm going to write none. Now, what I should mention with this, when you are writing part of your rule, each thing, okay, inside the brackets, this is an attribute, and this is an attribute value. We are always separating our attributes and our attribute values by a colon. We are always finishing every line of one of our individual rules with a semicolon. You must have all of those pieces. If you are missing one, it will break things, okay? If I do not have a semicolon, it might run if it's the last one, but if it's the second to the last one, it's going to break things. So if I looked here, and I did not have that, okay, I may not see right now, I'm not getting that gap that I did have because it does not know where the rule finishes. So here, once I do that, now it's reading both of them. I need to make sure that I am completing my code, okay? So we want this navigation. We need now to apply that. Where do I want to apply it? I want to apply it to what's holding these items. My block component is here. So I'm going to go ahead and write this at the very start, navigation. And I need to make sure that I'm spelling everything exactly the same and correct, okay? Navigation, now that class is being applied. I have 3 classes being applied, 2 utility classes, and 1 is, actual BEM methodology. What it did, it removed those lines. Okay, now each one of these line items could be their own separate class. Let's go ahead and write that. I'm going to call this navigation, 2 underscores, and item. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and copy this for each one. Class equals, and then double quotes, navigation, 2 underscores, an item. That's how I recognize a block element. Now, a block element is going to have a specific style, and I'm not styling just to the page. I'm doing like my general styling. So let's do block element. And then I'm going to copy that. End of block elements. And, all right. So inside of here, we have our navigation item. All right, what is our style that we generally want? Now, this is not utility class anymore, so that can do more than one thing. What do I want? Well, I don't really want that to be blue. I don't really want it to have that serif type font. I don't really want it to have that underline. and maybe I want like a rounded square to go around it. Okay, that's all stuff that I could design. So let's look at that. So let's see. We want to do some type of the text decoration. Let's look at that. That would be the underline. If I just am looking at what is there, and if ever I'm not sure, you know, I can do a quick search. So I could say, you know, how do I, maybe I go to W3 Schools and I do underline and CSS. That's the search that I'm going to do. Let's look at it and see what it says, because I'm not expecting you to know everything of like every single HTML or CSS. This is giving us examples. An overline is a line above, line through, an underline, and an overline. Okay, that's what we're seeing. This is a text decoration, which is what I was playing around with. Okay, so text decoration none, that's what I want to apply to my navigation item. And that would take away the lines. Now, if it's not automatically doing it, then I got to look at how I wrote it. If I'm not writing it exactly the same, we got a problem. Okay, now this, it's applying it to the line item, which is kind of pointing out stuff. My line item is giving me a style, but really what is, so let me open this up so you can see it. The anchor tag is actually what is doing the underlining. Okay, so I could do the anchor tag needs to inherit, but if this is what I'm doing as my navigation item, I don't have to attach it to the one that's directly below it. I can attach it to what is going to be doing that effect. So here, I want it to be here, navigation item. Okay, and see how it removed it? Okay, I got to apply it to the correct element. So it's not affecting the line item, it's affecting the anchor element that's inside that line item. That is the element of my navigation. So I'm moving this. Okay, so now I've fixed the underline. I know that it's now linked up correctly. What else do I want to do? Let's do font, family. We can, you know, start changing some stuff. Let's do sans serif font. I could do some other type of font right now, but I'm just doing some general styling. Let's change the color. Now, what I'm thinking of when I'm doing this navigation item, I'm thinking of in terms of like the general settings for all navigation items on all of my pages. If I lock this stuff to say colors here, that's doing it for all of them. Okay, so I may not want to put color here. I may want that to actually be a block element modifier. Okay, but I do want to have some type of outline. Let's do border radius, and then it's top left, top right, bottom right, bottom left. So I can give it, you know, some values. If I did just 1, so let's look up border radius so we can see it. Don't need that. Just doing here, border radius. Let's see what values we get. Okay, we can set a border and then we can actually start rounding the edges. Okay, so border, which I could do, I don't, this is the shorthand way. Border. Border right here. Let's just go into this. We can do the shorthand way, which is doing the border width, the border style, and the border color. Okay. So I could use these ones each individually, or I could just do this. So I could see the different ones that we have for doing some type of rounding on it. Okay, so I give it a certain size. I can give, if it's solid, dotted, whatever, and play with it that way. So if I clicked on border style, I can see more of the different ones that they have. There's quite a bit. So let's see the demo. Here is the different types that they have. Dashed, inset, outset, ridge. So all of these, we can do stuff. I kind of like that. Outset. Let's see what the inset is. Groove. And we can play around with this. So let's do outset. And then we'll give it a... We'll look at the border type that we could do. And I could do each one, or maybe just the bottom or the left side. I could do all of those a solid one. So let's come back to our code pen. Before I do that, let's do 5 pixels. Let's do outset. Okay. Let's maybe do 2 rem. That's really big. So let's do 1.1 rem. That's really big. 0.3 rem. So bad. Now that would, if I increase my font size, that would start affecting it. Let's do light gray. Light slate gray. Okay, and then if I wanted to change my border radius, let's do 0 space 0.5 rem 0 and 0. There you go. I got just one rounded edge by putting that in there. I could do higher values. So, that's what we got. We have buttons that are kind of moving. They're staying in there. I can select them. That's what they're going to look like. That would be my navigation item. Okay, I'm saying all of them basically have that look. Now I could also say maybe all of them are going to have, let's say, a black color for the text. All of them have that black color, but I actually want it to be green. Okay, so then this is where I can do modifiers. So modifier, /. Oops. Now, some of this, depending on how you want to do your organization, it may make sense to keep your modifiers right next to the block elements that you might be using them for, but your modifiers could be moved around. So I might do navigation. So this is the class navigation. Helps if I spell it. Navigation item, and then here's my modifier. Let's do text green. Okay, I'm being kind of as specific as I can without being really wordy on what I'm doing. Now, what am I doing? I'm changing this color to green. Okay, now this is a modifier. I'm modifying everything on here by just the text color. Now this is kind of like the one-off. I need the specifics, so maybe this is my active link, okay, for this page. So for that one, I want here that's my active. So let's actually change this. Active would make more sense, and let's change that instead of this. Let's do active. Make sure it's linked back up. All right, so it's changing green, but let's do the border right, none, border top, or remove that, none. Okay, and then what do we got? We got border, and I'm going to probably have to change the order of this. 0.3 rem solid, and let's put green. Okay, now, even though I set these, this is overriding because this is doing all sides. So if I want, I can reset it to green and then take off the right in the top. So there it is. That's my highlight. Maybe I want to change the background to black, and I want to change the color of the text to white. That is my active. I think that looks kind of dumb, but you know, I'm not super great at styling, but that's how we would do it. This is the block element modifier. So whatever I attach that to is overriding the original styles. It's overriding what I did for my border. It's changing my font color. It's changing my background color. I could even change my font family and do some different type of font. So this is like me hovering. Okay, I could do this, you know, this type of styling for pseudo elements and stuff like that. But this is basically how we would do BEM. Now we're going to be using this and discussing this as we move on to cover other topic areas, hitting BEM for doing our styling. All right, good luck. Have fun.